when I was in school, it was very CBT oriented, very clinical, very evidence based. And there's beauty to that and there's importance to that. In this community that we're starting to build, there's just a deep appreciation for healing, for the importance of spiritual inclusion in the process, or love. Like I say this all the time. I went to 5 years clinical psychology school and no one ever said love. The word love was just not even mentioned. All these things that we kind of understand are like core to a healthy human experience were divorced from the more clinical perspective. I think because the field is seeking legitimacy.
Dr. Sharon Niv is a cognitive psychologist and neuroscientist whose work sits at the intersection of brain science, technology, and mental health. She earned her PhD in brain and cognitive science from the University of Southern California and has spent her career exploring how neuroscience and contemplative practices can improve emotional well-being. If you're going to be a future therapist, then you should be looking into the range of psychedelics and psycholytic assisted therapy. If you have not already, please subscribe to the channel. You can always become a member by joining our YouTube channel, gain access to videos that we have not released yet. And with that, we will jump right into this interview. All right, Dr. Sharon Niv, how are you doing today?
I'm really good, Phil. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here today. I am very much looking forward to this conversation. Actually, there's a lot of questions that I'm curious to know in terms of your expertise and perspective. But really quickly, could you just tell us a little bit about your background? What got you into the space of psychedelic medicine and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so my grad school was in clinical psychology, but I never went on to do the clinical licensure. So I ended up with a degree in cognitive psychology. But because I had that 5 years of training, several more years of clinical training too, that I was always thinking about there are so many beautiful approaches out there, but how do we scale? Like, how do we get to the people who need the help and they may not have the opportunities right before them? And so that's been like a theme throughout the various projects I've undertaken over the years. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I was gifted by the universe this opportunity to start Joyous. And Joyous is a telehealth platform where we prescribe a really unique protocol of very low dose ketamine. You can think of it as microdose ketamine. Um, Microdose is an interesting term because classically with something like psilocybin, magic mushrooms, it's considered subperceptual, like so mild that you don't even really feel it. This state, the more appropriate term is psycholytic rather than psychedelic. It's not subperceptual. You do feel it. It's like a tipsy state, but it's a really productive one, and I'm sure we'll jump all the way on through that. Um, when this opportunity presented itself a few years ago, the aim of the project for the entire team was how do we expand accessibility of this medicine as broadly as possible? How do we make it affordable? How do we reach people? How are we going to be the most available prescription for this really powerful medicine in the US? And that's what we've aimed to do. However, because it's the most affordable, it's about $129 a month, which is like by far the most affordable. But that means we can't pay therapists. That, therapists deserve to get paid, obviously. And so what we ended up doing was creating a free collaboration program for therapists. It's just called Joyous for Therapists, pretty on the nose. Um, but the idea there is to train the therapist. We created a certificate program, 11.5 CE credits, with a school called Palo Alto University that trains therapists on everything they need to know to feel comfortable working with microdose ketamine in session. Um, and that's where we are now. And I'm hoping that it'll be an interesting conversation. Does that answer the question? Was there more to it?
This is great. This is great. That's a great introduction. There's a lot that's kind of going through my mind in terms of the low dose psycholytic, I guess, ketamine. How do you compare it then to other approaches in regards to psychedelics?
Totally. It's funny. I recently created three comparison charts and I'm happy to sort of walk through them. The first is the Joyous Protocol, psycholytic ketamine versus SSRIs. And there, what I would say is a couple of things. SSRIs work more with symptom reduction than ketamine, which actually can help with rewriting the neurowiring that underpins your rumination, your anxieties, all the kind of looping patterns. Ketamine actually kind of gets at the root, and you can start to really create new synaptic pathways. That's one. Another difference is the discontinuation from ketamine is very easy, whereas we know that there's SSRI discontinuation syndrome that can be very, very challenging for many people. The efficacy is higher for ketamine. We are in the process of publishing our chart review. We're seeing about a 68 or 69% strong clinical response rate, like 50% reduction or higher. That's way higher than what we're seeing for SSRIs. A recent Lancet paper found about 15% response rate for SSRIs, which is not great. Um, However, I don't recommend daily ketamine for the rest of your life, whereas you could conceivably take Prozac for 30 years. So that is also, I think, a consideration to make. So that's one comparison. Happy to answer more questions if you have any on that. Another would be low dose versus high dose ketamine. Maybe I'll save that one actually. We'll go into that in a sec. So the third comparison chart was ketamine versus psilocybin versus MDMA. And of course, there are other psychedelic medicines, but those seem to be like the three big buckets that people talk about. Um, in terms of legality, ketamine is the only one that's fully legal in the United States. It's a Schedule 3 medicine, which makes it like even less monitored than something like Adderall, which is in Schedule 2. Uh, but it is being prescribed what's called off-label. It's an FDA-approved medicine for anesthesia, and it's now being prescribed pretty broadly for anxiety, depression, PTSD. We'll see whether the FDA indication actually ends up like changing to meet that as well. So it is legal, whereas MDMA is still very much in clinical trial form. Psilocybin is legal in Colorado and Oregon, but otherwise, also most clinical trials, if you want to be like above, go above board, there's certainly many wonderful guides working in the underground, but I think most therapists are more interested in, doing things in a legal way. At least many people are. So that's one. Two is the effects phenomenologically are quite different. So who might you think is a good match for psilocybin? Deep depression for sure, but in a lot of like spiritual angst can be really aided. End of life, we've seen a lot of studies on life. Um, Ketamine also has this spiritual component. There is often a sense of connecting with something bigger, with something divine. Like that certainly does happen too, but you have to give it to like high dose psilocybin for kind of being the king of that realm. MDMA wonderful for PTSD is reduces fear so significantly that you can really work with some of that content with a sense of safety. Ketamine does too, but in a different way. In a different way. So what ketamine does for you is because it's a dissociative anesthetic. Um, what it does is really loosen the somatic sense of self in a pretty particular way, and it allows for re-examination of content from a sense of safety. So maybe now is where it's okay to talk about high dose versus low dose ketamine, because ketamine is a fascinating medicine that acts very differently at different dosing points. So if you go high enough, I mean, it's an anesthetic. You're out for surgery. You go, yeah, a bit lower, you're at what they call like the K-hole zone, and that's typically an ego death. the default mode network. I think your audience is probably somewhat familiar, but this is kind of the network associated with sense of self, rumination, evaluation of self, future planning, back evaluation. So that goes offline with an ego death, with a K hole. It is a visual state too. The visuals have a different quality than what you might expect for psilocybin or LSD. It's less of like wavy, melty. It's a bit more crystalline, but it's very visual. It's very, if you consider psychedelics something that is really playing with the senses, ketamine is, in that sense, I believe, really a psychedelic. But then you go a little bit lower and you're at the zone that you might consider high dose ketamine assisted psychotherapy, or CAP. Um, Typically what you see there is the patient goes, or the client in therapist parlance, goes to their provider's office. They can take a couple of either rapid dissolve tablets, or if there's someone there qualified to administer an intramuscular shot, they get a shot. And it's rapid onset within 10 to 15 minutes. They lie down. They have iTunes on, there's music. Typically, there was a preparation session ahead of time, so maybe an intention was set with the therapist. But to some extent, you are now on a journey. Your mind, your consciousness decides where you're going to go. And so the client is typically, lying down, eyes closed. They're probably not speaking. They may say a few words here or there. The therapist writes them down. Later in the integration session, you can discuss. But for the most part, you're at the whims of your psyche, and that can be beautiful. That can be healing. It can take you to where your mind wants you to go, rather than where your ego wants you to go. So there's a huge benefit to that. But that's not even what we're talking about. We're taking it one level of dosing below to this microdose or psycholytic dose. And what you get there is what I call partial dissociation. So the experience is like almost your body grows. It's almost like you're bigger than your body. Instead of being this little room that experiences somatic distress, nervous system dysregulation, and symptoms of anxiety, depression, you're like identified with it. You're bigger. You're bigger, and all of that stuff can still exist, but you can see it from, you're the entire room rather than this body. And it becomes less overwhelming as a result of that. You really can work with it, and you're also you're fully oriented, oriented times three, as they say, like, who you are, what you're doing, where you are, what the context is, and you and your therapist can now work together intentionally on whatever you were already doing. It's just you coming in less resistant, less defended, more open, more calm. It's almost like you're immediately dropping into self from IFS or Wise Mind, or like a really easy way of just being in this um, regulated narrative mind, quieting down, open, exploratory state. A real sense of honesty, a real sense of being able to touch into what's true for you. We have this, maybe I'll put that in the show notes for you if you're interested. We have a little testimonial reel from therapists and clients when we started this Joyous for Therapists program. And one of the clients says something to the effect of, I felt that feeling of I need to say what's true for me. So often people feel blocked from really making contact with and speaking their truth out loud. Ketamine's your friend in that realm. So that's the overview of all the different comparison charts I've been busy with.
That's incredible. How long are these sessions typically?
They last about, so that's the great thing about psycholytic therapy, is that it lasts within the length of a normal session. The experience itself is somewhere between 40 and 60 minutes. And so many clients take it like 15 minutes before the start of session. So they're already like starting to feel the effects as the session begins. The peak of the session kind of peaks with the effects of the medicine. And then by the time the session is over, they're more or less back to themselves. One caveat I should mention is we do recommend not driving for 2 hours post the dosing. So if you're at your therapist's office and you took that medicine 15 minutes prior, you probably have another 45 minutes after before we think it's a good idea to drive. So go for a Starbucks, go for a walk, journal in the waiting room, whatever, or get a ride home, get an Uber. um,
Wow. And you may have mentioned this already. So, in terms of, I guess, even the process for therapists to get into this, it seems like there are programs throughout the country that you can go through, get the certification, get the training. Is there a broad, like, kind of national program, or how can someone in, I don't know, Ohio or Florida or Massachusetts kind of go through some of this training process?
all three of those states we do cover. We're in 8 states, so you can definitely go to our site joyous.team and look at. I believe it's under pricing that we list what states we're in. It's not, yeah, not most intuitive, but that's where it is. 28 states. And we will train people how to work with psycholytic ketamine at this point in time, which is the lower dose stuff. For the higher dose stuff, there are many national programs that will work with you via telehealth as well. There's IPI, which I believe is, I could be getting this wrong, but Integrative Psychiatry Institute. Either way, IPI. There is Fluence. Um, the CIIS has a program. I don't remember if it's online or not, but there definitely are other programs that will certify you to work with higher dose ketamine if that's of interest.
Wow. And would a, like, let's say a master's level therapist or a psychologist or psychiatrist, where would they go for the ketamine? Would they go to a medical center? How would they?
If they're hoping to work with the psycholytic dosing, we want to be there. If they're in 28 states that we serve, we want to be your medical partner. So the idea would be you send your clients to us. It's the referral's free, the program's free, the training's free. Send your client to us. We are the medical evaluator. We're the medical prescriber. We're the medical monitor. We do a very close monitoring system with our patients where they have to, at least for the first 6 weeks, respond to weekly questionnaires about their symptoms, side effects, mood, sleep. And that helps us adjust their dose to find the right dose for them, as well as like to take it during the day, whether or not to split the dose throughout the day. Um, and so we want to be that partner, and then your client brings in that medicine into your sessions together. We are internally debating right now, maybe this is unwise to say, whether to also offer high dose prescription only with therapist. We There are companies that'll send it just to people's homes without a therapist, and we didn't want to do that. I'm open to considering it only with licensed therapists. We don't currently have high dose training, so the question would be, do we only take people who already have prior high dose training? I think that's probably the right thing to do, or maybe create an addendum training. This is all stuff that I'm still thinking about. But as of right now, if you want to work with low dose and you're in the 28 states we serve, we want to be your partner. If you want to work with high dose, there's a Journey Clinical exists, and they will do high dose work. I do know that they do charge a membership fee for therapists. I believe it's $150 a month, but they are available at least for that. Or you can find a local prescriber who is comfortable prescribing ketamine. Many people do that as well. About 15 to 20% of our patients will either experience some dizziness, some nausea, or some, uncomfortable body sensations that they're not used to. And for the vast majority of them, we've after 90,000 patients, we've really honed in the approach for how to help them. Eat a small meal before, or if you're having dizziness, lie down with your eyes closed for the first 15 minutes. We really like have nailed it down. Some percentage of patients just really find it intolerable and they discontinue, and that's good. That is they know it's right for them. A higher percentage of people than we expected have sleep disruptions if they take it too late at night. They find, like, kind of like caffeine, they find that it tires them. So we usually make a recommendation if people find that their sleep is disrupted, to take it before. It depends what time their bedtime is, but 4 or 5 hours before bed, or prior to that, like no later than 4 or 5 hours before bed. Uh, there a couple things worth mentioning. There is a known bladder issue with high dose recreational use. We do monitor bladder health, and we don't see a problem with this. The comparison between what like a someone with an addiction to ketamine might take is something like a gram to 5 grams a day, and that generally insufflated, which is a fancy way of saying snorted. And so that is a higher bioavailability of about 35%, as opposed to the form that we use is buccal. There are these little waxy cubes that kind of stick between gum and cheek, 25% bioavailability. And the highest dose that we'll support is 120 milligrams. So it's a very, very different, it's kind of like the equivalent drink a handle of vodka every day, you're going to wreck your liver. But if you have half a glass of wine every day, you're not going to wreck your liver. Same kind of thing. It's high dose ketamine can lead to bladder issues. We've not seen that to be the case with these very low doses.
That's so helpful. There's so at least from what I've read too, in terms of psychedelics like psilocybin or LSD, it seems like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, some other contraindications seems like there's for patients who are coming in or have history of psychosis. Uh, is that impacted at all in terms of ketamine
Yeah,
specifically?
we definitely will not prescribe to people who have a history of psychosis. Um, We also, at Joyous at least, we will not prescribe to people who have a history of mania. We will work with bipolar 2 hypomania. We won't work with mania, even though the research is actually pretty mixed. There's some good evidence that ketamine can be helpful in bipolar 1 disorder, but we think it's a high acuity enough condition that it really merits working more closely than telehealth allows. So we won't work with that. Other psychiatric contraindications for us, we won't work with active substance use disorder. We really think like get that. We'll work with people who have a history, provided that they're stable. But we don't think it's too risky that you'll just try to replace one addiction with your daily ketamine, even though again our doses don't support addiction on their own. But like still in that state of struggling with addiction, let's work on that first. And then you can work on the underlying depression, anxiety, trauma that probably got you there to begin with.
So it's interesting, like in traditional psychotherapy, at least from what I've seen in the research, anywhere from, let's say, 16 to 24 sessions, like whether it's acceptance and commitment therapy, DBT, CBT, seems to, patients tend to start to go down in terms of their depression or anxiety. How many sessions on average would you say that someone is when they're integrating ketamine and psychotherapy
It is such an unknown. Like in terms of the low dose stuff, this is part of the aim of the program is to start to collect data from therapists. My guess would be somewhere between 10 and 20 sessions with like boosters as necessary, but I don't know. A lot of the research on ketamine was only conducted with a higher dosing. And they talk about something like, because in most of the time it's IV, or excuse me, IV, and it's IV without psychotherapy for the most part. They're just using it. And so there we have a lot of studies looking at like 6 to 8 sessions. And it's all very high dose stuff for the most part. There is, if not a complete K-hole, it's at least in the psychedelic realm, but generally there is a complete K-hole there. And as I said, there's always a benefit to having your ego. I'll go offline. I think it's just like it's like taking your computer and hitting reset. Turn it off, turn it on. It'll just come back a little a little better with fewer of the bugs. But that's not the same as what we're talking about, which is just vastly under researched. And we're very excited to start asking these questions. Like we're going to be able to publish later this year. Within a month, we're expecting to submit it, which is really exciting. But that's going to be on our entire patient population, which to date is about 90,000. They ended up deciding only to use 60,000 because our earlier in our first year and a half, the surveys we were using, they were like, this just isn't as good. Let's focus on, okay, fine. So we're going to focus on 60,000. But that's going to only look at the effects of the medicine. We don't even necessarily know who's in therapy. We can maybe do that calculation because people tell us in the intake, are you in therapy or not? Now that I think of it, we should probably do that. I'm going to reach out to my research team right after this. But we won't really be able to look at therapy specifically. One of the aims for Joyce for therapists is I don't want to give therapists extra work. Y'all are busy. Like, I get it. But the ones who are willing to answer some questionnaires or like do some qualitative interviews who are interested into the field, that would be a huge gift, to be able to start to say, okay, like, hey, we talked to 50 therapists who are doing this kind of work. Here's what they're reporting. So that's my, yeah.
That's amazing. I'm sure too. I guess what I was thinking is, for me, even as a psychologist, if I'm doing therapy and also integrating some some psycholytic medication, what does the therapy look like? You mentioned a little bit like the patient will kind of go into this zone of, kind of saying what's on their mind. But do we have interventions like CBT or IFS or maybe that's more specific for the patient at the end of the day? But I'm curious if you have any thoughts on maybe the type of psychotherapy.
What we've been telling therapists is whatever you're already doing, whatever you feel comfortable with and works for you, go for it. But our assumption is that there are like three classes of therapies that work best or that might be most congruent with psycholytic ketamine. Um, the first being ones that have to do with mindfulness, because what happens sort of naturally with ketamine, with that dissociative piece, is the observer stance becomes just more available. First of all, the mind kind of quiets down and slows down, so it's easier to track. Usually, especially with depression, anxiety, it can be so racing, so ruminative, so obsessive that it can be hard to even disentangle it from it enough to observe it. So mindfulness based therapy is very, very good. Somatic based therapies, because even though it's a dissociative, in the partial dissociation state, you can have heightened awareness of the body because you're not overwhelmed and trying to resist the sensations of your nervous system, right? Like, so often it's so painful to go into the patterning that was established during times of overwhelm and trauma that it's hard to gain somatic awareness of them. It feels dangerous to the body. The body resists it to some extent. The system resists it. Ketamine gives you, one of our therapists described it as a blanket of safety where it's easier to make contact with it. And so then to the same degree, the third class I've put in there is trauma informed therapies. Just anything that really um, methodically starts to make contact with the sources of trauma is going to be well served by ketamine therapy. So we've heard amazing reports of EMDR. There are two ladies who specifically run trainings on psycholytic ketamine and EMDR out there. Danielle and Michelle, I think Danielle Chacon and Michelle Topol, something like that. If you're interested in that, Sunny Strasberg and Dick Schwartz have been running psycholytic ketamine plus IFS for the last couple of years. I think they're writing a book. They are releasing a book exactly on that right now. So certainly that's a very good match. Ketamine and mindfulness. Any specific people I'd associate with that? I guess not right off the bat, though. I'm sure there are people out there doing mindful therapy with ketamine. So those are three categories of really well matched approaches. But honestly, anything. I have one great therapist in the program who was just saying, I'm a CBT therapist through and through. And my God, the sort of like, there's an insight, a shift of perspective that happens where they can see it. They're like, oh, here's how that thought has been affecting me. And it's been, yes, we've been talking about it, but I didn't see it the way I see it now. So honestly, many, many therapy approaches can really be benefited. It's worth a try, whatever you're into.
I love that. I love that. I love the. I'm a somatic therapist myself, and I do a lot of mindfulness based techniques with my clients, and so that really does resonate with me. I'm wondering too what you think about this because from the research that I've done and the literature that I've looked at, it does seem like this is really promising, right? And there's already evidence, there's already research about this as well. I also think it's interesting, like when you compare SSRIs to psycholytic based modalities. I've seen so many of my clients who are on SSRI medication for years and years and years, and they say it's not working for them. And we also know the statistics in terms of the percentage or the success rate for SSRIs. And I always wonder, when is there going to be this shift where maybe, not to say that we completely disregard SSRIs or SNRIs and things like that, but when do we start to really integrate some of these other modalities and interventions in a way that therapists in school start learning about it, or psychiatrists or medical doctors? When do we start to at least expand the horizon when it comes to interventions?
It's a great question. Hopefully soon, at least with ketamine because it's legal. I understand the reluctance to teach psilocybin at a state institution. That like, okay, I get it. It's not legal, but ketamine's legal. It's legal, and the effects are powerful. I don't know. I don't know. I hope soon. And one promising thing is like it's one of the few cross the aisle issues that we've got. RFK Jr. is a big fan of psychedelics. I keep hoping some movement happens on that front, but we'll see.
I think it's interesting. Like some of I've worked in VA hospital settings, and they've always talked about, including MDMA for PTSD, specifically for veterans or people with severe PTSD. And I always think like, okay, if you have an intervention or a modality where it's, let's say, more efficient or maybe potentially more cost effective, uh, at what point, in terms of therapy forever and ever and ever versus maybe these short based modalities where people can really get the help that they need and then also be productive on their own. At what point does maybe pharmaceutical companies start to engage in that? And maybe there's some barriers there. Maybe there's barriers with policy. Like it feels like the institutional system barriers can halt a lot of the progress.
Yeah, it does. It does feel like that. It's at some point it becomes sort of unethical not to really try to explore what's the best way to get people the most relief. Um, no, I'm with you. I wish I had more of an institutional eye to, what do we do going forward? I am happy that S-ketamine is covered by many insurances. That's good. There are differences between S-ketamine and racemic ketamine. So those of us who didn't take chemistry in college, they're like basically each molecule, unless they're perfectly symmetrical, has like a handedness, a right hand and a left hand. And what happens, yeah, so like let's say this is ketamine, you've got a right hand and a left hand on ketamine. What S-ketamine is just taking one of those molecules. And so Johnson and Johnson patented that for ketamine, whereas racemic ketamine is both S and R. Um, and experientially, the S-ketamine is a little less euphoric. It's less warm and visual and spiritual. It's more dissociative. Um, but it does seem to have the antidepressant effects. And then it's also hard to disentangle the studies that were done with S-ketamine, which is the brand name is Spravato, if that's a more familiar name. So Spravato is administered in a clinic, monitored by nurses or some other clinician. And what I hear of it is that someone was just in my therapist meeting yesterday saying it felt like chemotherapy. It felt like you're going in like a white room with fluorescent lights, and it's not a healing environment. So it's hard to disentangle what's the effects of the setting versus the medication itself. But so Spravato is effective. I think the research suggests, though it's hard to really know for the reason that I just mentioned and divorce all the different factors. It does work. The research suggests that racemic ketamine, that is the mix of both molecules, is better for anxiety depression. But it is insurance, so that's for most insurance, so that is good. And we try to be affordable. We try to be the affordable alternative in as many states as we've gotten to. But yeah, I do really wish that I do really wish that more training institutions took this stuff into account and made it like at least a track, at least a course that you might consider taking for a semester. What would it be like to work with ketamine when when you're out in the world as a licensed therapist?
My own graduate training, I think we had a few courses on like, yeah, psychotropic medication. And even though I don't have prescriber authority, just learning that is so helpful because so many patients are coming either on medications or off medications. And so just having that general information is really helpful. And I wonder how helpful it would also be to have some form of courses in the range of psychedelics or psycholytic, assisted therapy. I'm wondering what would you say is your vision, let's say 5-10 years from now, what could this world look like as it relates to ketamine assisted therapy?
What would be amazing is to really grow this community into a place, an ecosystem of mutual support. Um, the therapists who are coming in, they're they're more consciousness movement informed. They're more about deeper healing. It's very different than the sort of when I was in school. It was very CBT oriented, very clinical, very evidence based, and there's beauty to that, and there's importance to that. You have to bear out the results too, but in this community that we're starting to build, there's just a deep appreciation for healing, for the importance of spiritual inclusion in the process, or love. Like I say this all the time. I went to 5 years of clinical psychology school, and no one ever said love. The word love was just not even mentioned. All these things that we kind of understand are like core to a healthy human experience were divorced from the more clinical perspective. I think because the field is seeking legitimacy. We're seeking scientific credibility. I understand that, but it feels incomplete. And so the hope for this program is to really build a community of therapists who can share, skill share, knowledge share, develop protocols together. Like it's starting to organically emerge. A few therapists will come and say, we're interested in how this might apply to autistic individuals, and that they can start speaking, sharing notes. Someone came in a few weeks ago and said, I'm really interested in working with the medicine with sexual trauma. Is anyone interested in collaborating with me, sharing notes? And so if we manage to grow an ecosystem of like-minded people who can support one another and have shared language around integrity, around open-heartedness, what does healing actually mean? I'd really like it to become an influence on the clinical world, where therapists who think in these ways, which so many do, like have a home base, a community to connect with. That's the hope. And then the research piece too. Like I said earlier, if we can get some data and start deriving some, like knowledge here, ideal.
Oh, interesting. Like even, yeah, I totally relate to that. Like going through graduate school and feeling like there was this sense of, at least with me, clinical psychology, my program was very trying to mirror itself in terms of the medical model, right? I had a lot of rotations in the hospital and the medical centers, and I felt like, in a sense, clinical psychologists were really trying to partner with medical physicians and psychiatrists. And so I feel like, unfortunately, sometimes it in doing that, it takes out that human piece, like you mentioned, in terms of the context of love. I've talked with other clinicians too about the context of spirituality. When patients come into the room with bringing up their own spiritual, religious experiences, so much research shows that, as a clinician, if you're trained in that, you can sort of kind of incorporate and integrate that within the psychotherapy. But sometimes people might see that as woo woo, and no, that's not for the therapy setting, or that's not. Let's not get into that. And I also look at even like Eastern medicine practices. It's funny how, like with things like meditation and mindfulness, these have been things that have been going around for hundreds and centuries, and yet now we're trying to scientifically include it within our modalities. So it's always interesting how you kind of see Western medicine kind of falling behind a little bit, and kind of lagging behind in some of the things that we already know to be true.
Totally. Yeah, that's so real. Yeah. And the more research we do, the more woo woo stuff just kind of gets like validated. Yeah.
Let's say in the future, let's say psilocybin or other psychedelic assisted therapies do become legal. MDMA starts to become perhaps a modality as well. What would your stance be in terms of the psilocybin, the MDMA, or even the ketamine in terms of?
I think all three of those medicines and more, there's like people come back with deeply healed experiences from ayahuasca, with San Pedro, with Chuma, or Chuma is San Pedro, with peyote. Um, 5-MeO DMT is, I think, a little misunderstood, but it's so many possible experiences. But at least for those three that have a lot of clinical research and seem like the ones that'll probably be the next in line if we head toward a brighter future on this. Um, I think they're all wonderful and they all have really broad and positive potentials and benefits. Um, I would love to see a future where these things are available. And it's an interesting question whether I don't know that it's appropriate to only medicalize them either. There's something to be said for joy and exploration and the right to change your own consciousness in responsibly and wisely, not children, not certainly don't take stuff to go driving, but I don't know. I think that they should not only be thought of as therapeutic tools, but as spiritual tools too, as tools for connecting with um, your birthright of knowing that you are deeply interconnected with the entirety of the universe. You're stardust. There's a lot to be said, not just for keeping it in the medical and therapeutic model, but we can speak to the medical and therapeutic model. If these things become more widely available, I hope that Joyous creates programs to incorporate them as well. People get a lot out of microdosing of psilocybin for one. Certainly higher dose stuff. I would love to support therapists in learning how to work with higher dose stuff as well. Um, I think it'll be if MDMA does get finally approved by the FDA. My understanding is 5 to 7 years. Don't quote me on that, but of at least trademarked rights for only Lycos is now the name of the company that's spun out of MAPS. They would be the only ones with exclusive right use. I mean, they've sunk so much money into this research that's deserved, but at least for 5 to 7 years, if not 8, they will have exclusive rights there. So we couldn't get into that market for a while. Once that's released, I would hope that we would, and try to make it affordable and accessible. Yeah.
I think that, yeah, this is really exciting. For the future therapist, for the one who is, let's say, in high school or college or even in graduate school, and they envision themselves being clinicians in terms of being integrated into this space. Any advice you would have for them? Like, what would be the steps to get into this and get certified and start actually practicing these things?
I think it's important to have your own experience with these medicines, and again, to do it responsibly and to do it with support, with guidance, with a good sitter, with someone who's done this medicine before. Certainly, one thing we offer in the Joyous for Therapists program is if you're not familiar with the psycholytic state, we're going to give you this medicine for basically at cost for us, which is like $50 a month, so that you can get that experience. It is very important that you know what it feels like, what the opportunity is, what your client is experiencing. So one is understand your own consciousness, understand the potential of these medicines and what they can do on a personal level, uh, and do your own work. And that's always true. But one of the pre and thank you by the way for that beautiful prep document. I've never gotten one of those before, and it's probably my 20th podcast. Thank you. Uh, Well, one of the questions you ask on there is, what are the ethical considerations? There is a heightened vulnerability with these medicines, right? So you as a therapist need to be impeccable. There's a power imbalance. Perhaps your clients, as we said earlier, willing to say the things that they may not be ready to say otherwise. You're holding very precious and very vulnerable in your hands, and you need to honor that and treat it with your deepest integrity and highest respect. So do your own work, experiment with these medicines first. Don't do anything outside of your scope. Get trained. do the do trainings. Hopefully ours will remain free, but we'll see. This is the time to do it, therapists. It's free for the next few months. Free 11.5 CE credits. Yeah.
When will it not be free? Is there a time?
My problem is we wanted to keep it free forever and people just aren't finishing it. So we were like, well, we might need to have some urgency. So I'm thinking another 2, 3 months to keep it free. The truth is, if you, I'll make this like public, even if we end up charging something for it, if you come to me and you're like, give me free access for 3 weeks. I'm a new therapist. I work with low income. I do that. Give me free access. I'll be like, great, you have 3 weeks to finish this, go, free, or a month, whatever. But I just want people to actually do it. And it seems like people don't value what's free. That's marketing 102. So,
If there's anything have we not talked about that you'd like to bring up about this topic?
yeah, let's think about it. Gosh, you had so many good questions. I'm looking at them right now. So, why, I think how to talk to clients about it is one thing that I get asked about a lot. Therapists are concerned about being looking like drug pushers, which is totally understandable, but couldn't be further. It's no different than saying to your client, "I'd like to refer you to a psychiatrist to get evaluated for antidepressant, anti-anxiety." You're basically saying, "I'd like to refer you to someone who might evaluate you for ketamine." And we can talk about what I know. You can talk to the prescriber about what they know. You can ask all your questions. We, for one, do not ask anyone to pay until after their medical consultation so that they can go in, speak to the provider, ask their questions, and the client can decide that after a few weeks it doesn't feel right to their system. They haven't lost a ton of money. It doesn't take a lot to discontinue the medication. That can be stopped cold turkey. It's not like an SSRI. Um, it's worth trying. It's sort of like the potential benefit is big and the potential cost is low. It's like unlikely it's not going to break the bank. It's not going to uh, deeply destabilize you. If it doesn't feel right, just stop. But the potential benefit is huge. We just hear from patients every day. I feel like myself again after 20 years. I'm able to touch into my joy for the first time in a long time. I actually have this understanding of what's going on that I've never had before. It just the outcomes are profound. It is a really, really powerful medicine.
That's incredible. I also love the fact that in terms of your background, you did something that wasn't necessarily the traditional path of like getting your doctorate and then going full into therapy. Like you've been able to, I think, craft a really important niche in this space. And so I think for whenever I mentor students or whenever I get consultations from students, I'm always trying to help them to also think outside of the box in terms of finding their passion, finding their love, finding the thing that they really aspire to things that they aspire to do, but in ways that they can really feel uh, genuine to who they are in terms of helping their patients and their clients. And so, as we close out, Dr. Niv, I am curious to know. This is my last question. This is a question I give to all of my guests, but you do, I'm sure, so much for the company, organization, patients, all of these things. What do you do for yourself? What do you do for yourself, whether physically, mentally, spiritually? How do you take care of you?
Yeah. So I record in my studio at the Joyous offices, but today you and I are talking on a Saturday, so I'm home. But we're in my little meditation hut on the roof. You can my little altar there, and this is my meditation cushion, and zabuton they're called. So I do sit a lot. I use ketamine too, by the way. It enhances my meditations when I do incorporate them. I love yoga, and I'm a very social person. I live in a co-living village in San Francisco. Uh, it's really fun. We are like, it kind of depends how you count it because some people are across the street and some people are building a house that's not yet built. But like, we currently have 12 living units, all filled with friends and the kids surrounding a backyard, a big shared backyard. So, oh, it's so fun. So I spend a lot of time with friends. How about you?
Oh, thank you for asking me. I think for me, I have found a lot of just solace in being able to read. I do a lot of meditation, mindfulness on my own as well. I play sports, basketball, soccer. I try and be active. I also love to travel. And so traveling has been something that, I don't know, just being able to kind of get out of my own bubble and see a different culture and experience different people and different experiences, I think is just something that everyone should do. I feel like it's just so needed. So, yeah, those are kind of my spaces of solitude and being able to fill myself back up.
Fantastic. Love that. What kind of meditation do you do?
It's usually more so breathing, whether it's like 4-7-8 or I've started to get more into like some of the Eastern traditional practices. I cannot pronounce the name correctly, so I'm not even going to like try. I think one of it starts with a V.
Adriana type practices or no?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Cool.
So I've looked into that as well, and but yeah, just a lot of just trying to be more in touch, with where I am in my body, my mind, and all of those things.
Or maybe Vipassana, actually. I'm not sure. Either way. Awesome.
I'll have to let you know. I'm like the name is like it's like right there, so I'll have to like look it up and let you know. uh, but
Well,
Dr. Niv, this was incredible. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for. I think I really appreciate these conversations because I think sometimes there's people on one side of the spectrum where they're like, no psychedelics, no psycholytics. This is horrible. This is bad. And then on the other side, sometimes people are like, oh, yes, but like they're not being in touch with the safety and the ethical considerations. And so I think having these conversations about just the nuances, about, who it's right for and going through all the proper channels to make sure that people are safe and are also just, being open minded to things that maybe they haven't tried yet or considered yet. And just being open minded to that, I think is great. So I appreciate your contribution to this conversation. It's been amazing.
thank you so much. And I'd love to just throw out if anyone has follow up questions on stuff we didn't hit, email me. I'm at Sharon, SHARON, joyous.team. And thank you, Dr. Sarpong. I didn't ask how to pronounce the last name, so I just said Phil.
You
But
got it right. Yep, you got it. We'll make sure to put all your social media links in the show notes as well. So,
thank you so much. Have a
no
great day.
problem.